You are listening to Elderberry Days, Season of Joy, the sequel to Elderberry Croft, written and narrated by Becky Dowdy. January 10. Dear Mama, I fell asleep thinking of you last night, and so you came to visit me in my dreams. You did not come alone. Yesterday, I took down all the twinkle lights I'd strung back and forth across the patio, and the shadows of the winter night that had been kept at bay crept in around me, taking me by surprise. The darkness left me feeling rather bereft, a bit like a lost child, alone and small. When Christian arrived for dinner, he eyed the solitary glow of the porch light in its old-fashioned globe mounted above the door, and without a word went about building us a grand fire in the stone pit on the patio. The weather cooperated, staying dry and crisp, and the smoke drifted up and away, leaving behind warmth and soft light and the fragrance of wood fire. We sat outside, bundled together in a blanket, talking of trivial things that belied the depth of what was happening between us. Christian stayed long past my witching hour, that moment each night when I'm brave enough to send him away without me, and I stood on the patio long after he was gone, unable to go inside, alone. Oh, how desperately ready I am to go with him. Even now my heart feels large and clumsy in my chest, pressing painfully against my lungs at the thought of making a home with him again. Home. I have thought of this place as home for a whole year now, this tiny cottage cradled against the bank of the wee stream burbling past my patio. Burbling, is that a word? If it isn't, it should be. It's very streamish. Beneath a giant eucalyptus tree whose rustling branches sing green lullabies in the January breezes, Elderberry Croft has been my home for 12 timeless months. Here at the Coach House Trailer Park, this hidden sanctuary I stumbled upon in what must surely have been one of my darkest hours, I found a whole group of people just like me, afraid to live, afraid to move forward, resigned and waiting for it to all be over. At first, it was enough to realize I didn't want that for them, and I determined to do everything I could while I was here to help them learn to breathe life in again. But in time, as I got to know each of my neighbors here, I realized I didn't want that for me either. We were all desperate for miracles, and God brought them in basket loads. Elderberry baskets, Mama, like the ones you and I used to make together. The for rent sign was so small I drove right by it, the awareness of it not registering until I was several blocks away. I wasn't looking for it. The notion of moving out hadn't even taken root until that moment. But as I followed Eddie Banks across the narrow bridge over the stream, I could feel myself already falling under the spell of the place. When I laid eyes on the forlorn little croft tucked in behind the huge coach house, I think my heart would have broken if it weren't already in pieces. It seemed as hollowed out and grief-stricken as I was, in spite of the stream burbling. That word, can't you just hear it, along beside it, and the lush vegetation embracing it? If a house could be a kindred spirit. It was little more than a shack, really, slouching resignedly in the back corner of the park, waiting, biding its time, just like everyone else here. The front door, painted a surly green, hung crooked on its hinges, the bottom of it trimmed at a discernible angle to accommodate the slope of the floor. The butter-colored paint on the siding was sun-faded and chalky to the touch, although only peeling in a few spots, and one of the windows had a screen missing. The painted eaves actually matched the color of the door, as did the narrow trim around the windows. Not completely abandoned, I realized, but in desperate need of a gentle hand. I saw the fragile bones of something lovely in its brokenness, Mama. but it wasn't until I noticed the tree that I realized I was the one the little home was waiting for. An elderberry tree, perhaps a decade old, had somehow taken root and was thriving along the edge of the stream just off the east end of the River Rock patio. Did you plant it there for me? I felt like Mother Goose's crooked man, a crooked woman, having walked a terribly crooked mile to get here, stumbling upon this little crooked house. Sans, of course, the crooked cat and mouse, although I did have a crooked tarantula come visit one day. I'll tell you about that another time. Last night, after Christian left, I stood on the patio in the dark, just listening to the stream and grieving for the elderberry tree I must leave behind if I am to go home again. Another goodbye. Why does love always require sacrifice? And so I thought of you, of elderberry trees and baskets overflowing with the bounty of a day spent with you, in the kitchen, in the garden, in the woods. A morning at the library, an afternoon at the farmer's market, laundry day. I only remember your baskets being full, Mama. Were they ever empty? You always had something spilling out of them. Visiting days. Oh, those were my favorite full basket days. Homemade bread and cookies for the Fontaines with all their kids. Tea and scones for Mrs. Tupper. Pie for Phil and Lisa. And treats for their dogs. I won Kathy and her dogs over with your peanut butter treats, by the way. She's a wonderful neighbor, I must say, always watching out for me, trading recipes and magazines and gardening tips with me. I wasn't so sure about her when I first moved in, though. She was very suspicious of me, standoffish, always watching me from behind her lace curtains. I'm pretty sure she even used a pair of binoculars to get a better look. So, that first week, I stayed outside as much as I could, cleaning up around the yard, settling all my potted plants into their new homes, hanging lights and wind chimes and bird feeders, giving Kathy a good look at me. All the while, I was studying her as much as I could, too. She had this terrible cough, one that sounded a lot like Mrs. Tupper's when she overworked her poor old lungs. So she wasn't outside often, making it difficult to just strike up a neighborly chat with her about homemade cold and flu remedies. But I finally realized that the way to Kathy's heart and lungs was through her dogs. She came outside with them for a few minutes several times a day, and I could hear her talking to them the whole time, as though they were talking right back to her. Well, you know me, Mama. I love dogs. I love cats. I love anything with fur or feathers, right? And they seem to feel the same about me. So I put together a twig basket for her, filled with a batch of your elderberry tea, a couple of pretty mugs, and a plate of doggy treats, and I went visiting, just like the old days. Worked like a charm. Earlier this week, Kathy snapped at me when I showed up unannounced with a large batch of elderberry tea. I told her I'd heard her coughing, and she rolled her eyes and told me to mind my own business. She took the tea, though, and I wasn't hurt. Not really. I know she's not angry with me, but only sad because I'm leaving. We've become good friends this last year. I found myself singing our song, You Are My Sunshine, as I stood out there last night, quietly so Kathy wouldn't be more upset with me than she already was, and so Doc wouldn't worry. Just the chorus, though. I used to think it was such a sweet, if a bit sad, song, but I looked up the lyrics a few years ago. It's a stalker song, Mama. You and Daddy sang me a stalker song as a lullaby. The end of that verse? But if you leave me to love another, you'll regret it all one day? It's just creepy. Regardless, how I loved it when you sang to me. How your words, especially near the end, came out sounding a lot more like the wind in the eucalyptus leaves than human melody. But I knew as long as you kept singing, you kept breathing, And when you could sing no longer, I sang to you. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. And despite the rather twisted nature of the song, a crooked woman must sing a crooked song, right? It was what I sang to Julian every night. There were times I could almost feel you there with us, singing along. It was his favorite, too, even in the womb. More often than not, it was the only thing that would calm him. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd sit in the huge beanbag chair with him and sing, soft and quiet, just like last night, so as not to wake Christian. Sometimes for hours, until Julian, stubborn as his daddy, drifted off, unable to keep those big green eyes open any longer. And yes, Christian is far more stubborn than I am. Oh, how I wish you'd gotten to meet him. I wish you had been there for our wedding, for Daddy when I moved away, for Julian's birth. For Julian's birthday. We had only one with him. For Julian's death. There, I said it. Julian's death. Oh, Mama. You came across the bridge last night, and you brought Julian with you. You two were out on a visiting day. You held his hand in one of yours, a basket, for once empty, in your other arm, and the two of you chattered like magpies all the way up the front steps to my crooked green door. I sat out on the edge of the patio, my feet in the water, and watched you two through the window as you began to fill your basket with my things. It took me several moments to realize what you were doing, and at first, when I tried to get up, the water clutched at my feet, and the periwinkle vines growing along the opposite bank wrapped leafy tendrils around my ankles, holding me there. Just before I panicked, I was free, and I hurried inside to stop you. You and Julian kept talking as though I wasn't even there, packing up all my things and tucking them into the bottomless basket. I kept pulling stuff back out, but I couldn't keep up with the two of you, and I began to cry, begging you to let me stay with you both a little longer. I woke myself up with my sobs, but as I lay there in the dark, trying to breathe through my tear-stuffed nose, I realized I was okay. I'm still broken. Maybe I'll always be. And, well, I know my jagged edges show, but I think I'm okay with that. It was so good to see you, Mama. It's been so long since I've dreamed about you. Thank you for bringing Julian. I'm glad you have each other. February 13. Dear Mama, I woke up today to only the scent of Christian lingering in the tousled blankets beside me. He told me last night that he'd be gone early, so I wasn't worried, but I drew his pillow to me, burying my face in it, breathing him in. I didn't realize how much I'd missed waking up in this bed until I was back here. I've heard it said that the sense of smell has the longest memory, and I believe it. I don't think there's anything more familiar to me than the wood and spice and citrus from his aftershave mingled with the man smell that's uniquely my husband. In some strange way, it always reminds me of Daddy, triggering childhood memories. But it's not exactly the same. No one else smells like Christian does to me. I have lots on my plate today, but I'm sitting in the beanbag chair in Julian's room, drinking my coffee and writing to you. I don't know exactly why I've started writing these letters to you, Mama. It's not like I have your address in heaven, and I know you have far better things to do in that crazy, glorious, breathtaking, magnificent, beyond my imagination place than look over my shoulder to read the words I'm writing. Things like climbing epic trees or herping with Julian. I bet the reptiles are incredible in heaven. But it gives me great comfort to see your name at the top of the page, to picture your face as you read my words, and to imagine what you might say in response to my babbling. I don't come in here and hang out with Julian's stuff when Christian is home, mainly because we spend just about every moment together when he is here. But he watches me when I pass by this room, his face carefully blank. I see the tightening around the corners of his mouth, though, as though he's holding back words he knows won't help. But when I'm home alone, sometimes I just end up here. I found Julian's baby monitor shoved into a shoebox on the top shelf of his closet. I don't remember doing that, so perhaps Christian did. Although he didn't change anything else in here, at least not that I can tell. I'm glad. I don't think I could have borne coming home to this room dismantled or empty. We'll do it together, Christian and me, when we're ready. I set up the monitor right after I found it. As soon as Christian leaves in the morning, I clip the parent unit part of it to my pants as I work around the house and garden. Christian has had a whole year to accept the silence that comes out of this room, but I still need to turn the monitor on and listen. I'm not crazy or depressed or anything like that. I know I'll not hear Julian, but the static makes me feel connected to him somehow, just the same, as though the line isn't completely severed. I know you understand, Mama. Don't tell Christian, not yet. He'll worry about me. Sometimes being home is like what you see in the movies. The daylight shines into the rooms in a soft golden hue, the smell of coffee in the morning, clinking pots and pans and dishes because there's someone to cook for and eat with. Waking up in the middle of the night for a glass of water and not bothering to turn on the light because my feet know the way in the dark. I feel like I'm drifting in slow motion, touching surfaces and textures as familiar to me as the back of my hand, a smile of perfect contentment on my face. Other times, it's as though I must use a wedge and mallet to force myself back into a space that has closed up in my absence, like one of those dreams where you are trying to run or scream, but your legs are moving through quicksand and all that comes out is a whimper. Those are the days I want to go back to Elderberry Croft, to my sanctuary, back into hiding, back inside of me where I can take out my pain and nurture it, feed it, shut out the world and everyone in it. But I saw what that turning inward does to people. I wish you could meet Patty Davis. She reminds me a little of you. She has this poofy brown hair like yours, and she wears slips too. But it's more about the way she looks at Richard these days. Something in her eyes makes me remember those moments I'd turn and catch you watching Daddy like that. I remember feeling like I should look away, but I couldn't. Richard. He was in terrible shape when I first moved there. Physically, he was, and still is, a tragic tale walking, but that's not what I'm talking about. He was even more twisted and raw on the inside than he was on the outside. It was the saddest thing to see, Mama, and I couldn't sit by and do nothing. I just couldn't. But it wasn't purely selfless, the special Valentine's Day evening Ivan and I concocted for his parents. I knew it would be a dark day indeed for me if I didn't do something. Christian sent me a Valentine card, but I knew I'd need substantial fortification to read it, and since I'm not really a drinker, I knew I needed fortification of another kind. So I baked and decorated and made plans with Ivan, and we pulled off one of the most romantic nights ever for Richard and Patty. Oh, my goodness, they were so cute. And when they drove off into the night in that limo, Ivan and I laughed about how we felt like proud parents sending the kids off to prom. When they were gone, Ivan helped me clean up. Then we sat outside together, bundled up against the dropping temperature in jackets, gloves, and the glow of success. We talked about Ivan's childhood, about how things had changed so dramatically after his father's accident, and although he'd already thanked me 1,000 times for the little bit I contributed, I could tell he was thanking me again by opening up to me about those dark days. I really like the Davis family, Mama. They're all broken in one way or another, but they want to be healed, and I can totally relate to that. When the words ran out, we were just fine with sitting there in silence together, listening to the sounds of the night around us, letting the fire burn down, until we heard the wheels of the limo on the gravel drive up front. Ivan hugged me tightly, then hurried back to his folks' place so he could be there to help them inside. Ivan, I pray for him all the time. What a wonderful young man he is. I read Christian's card after Ivan was gone, with only the glimmer of those February embers on his slanted handwriting. He has such lovely penmanship for a man, and I love that he's always handwritten his letters and cards to me. He wrote one of my favorite Thoreau quotes in the card: "There is no remedy for love, but to love more." And his own words, brief and simple, were as beautiful as his script: "I love you even more." You know, I thought by leaving I could somehow lessen our pain, but I know now that I only doubled it. How wrong I was. How patient and stubborn Christian is. I think the Apostle Paul must have known someone like Christian when he wrote 1 Corinthians 13, that passage about love. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I spoke to Patty yesterday. She called to thank me for that night. I can hardly believe it's been a year already. And to tell me Ivan has reserved the limo for them again for Valentine's Day. Richard and Ivan have everything planned, and all she has to do is show up looking pretty, per Richard's request. I could practically feel the heat of her blush over the phone. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and I feel a bit like a blushing bride myself. Christian is taking the day off, which is why he's putting in extra hours today, and we've not made any plans for the day until dinner. We're cooking Italian together, something we love doing. Bruschetta, zuppa toscana, we use your crock-pot for that, and chicken marsala over made-from-scratch spinach tortellini. Yum! We'll finish off with buttercream gelato drizzled with some of my elderberry pomegranate jelly. Yes, jelly. I made a batch over the weekend and it didn't set up. But it's so delicious we're using it like syrup for pancakes, ice cream, and even on our granola instead of honey. We're also drinking the last of my elderflower cordial I made last year while at Elderberry Croft. It's the perfect complement to this Italian meal. We love it in sparkling water. It's been raining a lot this month, which is really good for our neck of the woods. Drought is always a concern here in Midland, and last year was a really dry year. Besides, I love the rain. I love working in the garden when it's raining, if it's not too cold. And I love hanging out inside in fuzzy sweaters and thick socks, a cup of hot tea in hand. But I think I might suggest we go somewhere in the morning, maybe to Heaps Peak Arboretum up off of Rim of the World Highway. The dogwoods won't be in bloom yet, but this time of year, especially with these cold rains, we'll probably have the trails to ourselves. Coming home to the smell of that soup, hot baths, and a fire in the fireplace? Sounds pretty romantic to me. Someone's at the door. I'll be back. That was Christian on an early lunch break, or so he said at first. Pretty early for lunch. It was only 10:30. But he arrived about 2 minutes before Johnny showed up in his truck, the owner of our favorite nursery out in the canyon. They were delivering my Valentine's Day present, 2 gorgeous little elderberry trees, both just beginning to bloom. Johnny assured me that having 2 trees makes for much better pollination, and I'm hoping by next spring they'll be producing enough flower umbels that I can make some elderflower cordial from my own trees. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And how romantic is it to have 2 of them in our garden? Christian and I are going to plant them together in the morning before we head up to the arboretum. I kissed my husband long and sweetly before he left to go back to work. My coffee is growing cold in my cup, but I am loath to take a sip and erase the taste of his mouth on mine. My lips feel bruised, like they're still getting accustomed to that kind of activity after going so long without. How did we survive so long not kissing, without touching, without being able to breathe in the fragrance of each other? I feel like an addict, but in the best of ways, when I think about him. Like the Shulamite woman in Song of Solomon, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is sweeter than wine." Oh, Mama, a year ago not only did I feel completely shattered, but I didn't know where any of my broken pieces were. These days, I feel like I'm finding those pieces, one at a time. I don't know if I'll ever be able to put them back together again, Humpty, you and me both, but at least it no longer feels like they're lost forever, you know? And on days like this, when some of those pieces actually fit together and I can see parts of the pattern of who I am, who we are, who we'll be, I cup my hands and let them fill with hope. March 15. Dear Mama, it's raining again. We've had so much rain this spring. It's wonderful, really, so good for our drought. But after nearly 6 weeks of ponderous, murky skies, I'm beginning to feel a little like Henny Penny. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. Sometimes when it rains, I think it might be God weeping over the condition of things here on earth. The news is full of terrible things happening every day. School shootings, terrorist attacks, religious persecution, child abuse, spousal abuse, political bashing. You can't turn on the television or get online without feeling assaulted. But today, the rain feels rejuvenating, a harbinger of something else to come, but something good, something hopeful, as though the moment the sky clears, all will be revealed. If I sit really, really still, I can feel my heart thumping and maybe even hear my blood rushing through my veins. It's a rather delicious sensation, expectant, like that verse in Romans. Oh, how I wish you'd had a chance to read the Message Bible with me, Mama. You would have loved it. It's such a contemporary, poetic version of the Bible. Although I suppose you've probably read it, haven't you? You probably have access to every version of the Bible ever written right there at your fingertips. Will you read it to Julian for me? I know he'd get a thrill out of God being captain of the angel armies. How epic is that? Here's that passage from Romans. This resurrection life you received from God is not a timid, grave-tending life. It's adventurously expectant, greeting God with a childlike, "What's next, Papa?" God's Spirit touches our spirits and confirms who we really are. Pretty cool, huh? Adventurously expectant. That's how I feel today. What's next, Papa? And I do sense the Holy Spirit working in our lives. I don't know how to explain it because it's been a tough week, but I do feel confirmed, as though I am valued on a level I can't fully realize in this life. We dismantled, cleaned out, took apart, packed up. What words do I use? The little rectangular box in our home that once housed Julian's earthly belongings is now empty. But the immeasurable chasm in my heart, the one that's connected to the bottomless pit in Christians, is not empty. I thought it was for the longest time. But last week, as we were taking apart the crib together, and I was crying so hard I couldn't breathe through my nose, I told Christian that I felt like one of those black holes in space you read about. Empty, nothing." He smiled, his eyes bright with his own unshed tears, took the side rail from my hands and pulled me close. "Do you know what a black hole is?" His voice, so close to my ear, was raspy, the way it gets when he's allowing me to just cry without trying to fix things. "A bottomless nothing, a blackness so black that no—" He cut me off with a shake of his head, then handed me a tissue from one of the boxes on the windowsill. I'd stalked the room before we began. "No, Willow, a black hole is just the opposite. It's where so much everything is crammed into one place, creating a gravitational force so strong that nothing can escape it, not even light. That gives it the appearance of nothing, when in fact it's an area that's immeasurably full." He cupped my face with both hands, brushing away my tears with his long thumbs. "You, my beautiful girl, are the black hole of all black holes." "I know, don't worry." He promised not to make that my nickname, at least not in public. I looked it up. He's right, Mama. All this love I have for Julian, all these memories and longings, this heartache and grief, I'd packed so much of it so tightly inside me that nothing was allowed to escape so I could enjoy even the miracle of our boy. For the first time, I really gave myself permission to sort through the Julian boxes in my heart, not just to grieve over his loss, but to find joy in the time we had with him. More pieces, Mama. I'm finding more of my pieces, and I'm seeing more of the person I'm supposed to be. The Holy Spirit is confirming who I really am. So, this morning, Christian and I made Greek yogurt donuts. Oh, my goodness. I pulled some frozen elderberries out and added them to half of the batter, along with a little almond extract. Christian prefers them without the fruit, but we took some over to share with Dad. He loves the elderberry donuts as much as I do, mainly because they remind us both so much of you. I'm enjoying another one with a third cup of coffee while I wait for Christian to get back from the hardware store. He's picking up supplies for our project today, and I opted to stay here and prep the kitchen, and eat more donuts, and have more coffee. Maybe that's why my heart rate is elevated and my blood feels like it's thundering through my veins. Caffeine and sugar, chemistry at its finest. Speaking of science, black holes and chemistry and human anatomy and all, we've decided to convert the breakfast nook into a lab kitchen of sorts for me. Wait, let me back up a little. Remember Joe from Space Number 9 and his drop-dead gorgeous wife, Vivian? Well, last month, she asked me if I'd be willing to bake a few of my elderberry pastries and pies for a big fundraiser event she was helping to coordinate. They attend this church in Los Angeles that has a really active homeless outreach, and they needed donations for a cakewalk. Have you ever done one of those? I had no clue what it was, so Vivian told me it was like a combination of musical chairs and bingo, depending on who was organizing the game. I still have no clue how it all works, but I'm happy to contribute anyway. Anyway, Vivian was going on and on about how much people loved my desserts and how I should figure out a way to package and sell them, blah, blah, blah. Well, the notion got stuck in my craw for a few days. What exactly is a craw? And when I mentioned it to Christian, he was all over that. He suggested I start with Mama Dosh and the Sienna Cafe. I actually flinched when he said her name at the thought of contacting her. I just didn't realize. All this time, I've been connecting that day, that moment of neglect on my part, that selfish desire to look good at my own goodbye party. I've been connecting it to her. In some closed-up corner of my heart, I've been harboring anger and bitterness toward Mama Dosh. If only she hadn't forced me to quit my job. If only she hadn't told me to go home and love on my child. If only she hadn't planned a goodbye party for me. If only, if only, if only. Do you know what Christian admitted to me then? He told me that he'd eaten at Siena almost every morning before work last year, that it made him feel closer to me somehow, knowing how much I loved that place and Gus and Mama Dosh. She asked about me every day, he said, while I couldn't bear even the thought of her. How wretched a human being am I! Why do we blame those we love for our own failings? I was so ashamed. Well, I baked up a storm for a few days, gathered my courage and humility around me like armor, filled a twig basket with elderberry muffins, elderberry donuts, elderberry banana bread, and individual elderberry apple crisp pies, cutest things ever, all individually wrapped in pretty cellophane and adorned with handmade Elderberry Croft labels, and I paid her a long overdue visit. And won't you believe it? Not only did she forgive me, I told her about my shriveled-up heart, and love on me. Like the Grinch, my heart grew 3 sizes that day, and brewed me the best chai latte I've had in my entire life. But she told me that if I get a Class B license, something required for me to sell my homemade products to any retail site, she'll sell anything I can produce under my Elderberry Croft label. That means my kitchen has to meet some rather strict standards, so I have my work cut out for me in the next few months. Although Christian's job is a good one, we're still living under some pretty huge school loans, so we've decided to do as much of the work as we can ourselves. Besides, right now, it feels good to have a project to work on together during this stage in our sorting things out. A like-minded goal, you know? Something completely separate from Julian, or even from us reunited as a couple again, but still something that's an investment in our future. Something we can do side by side rather than facing each other. Does that make sense? Oh, Mama, all that baking I did last year. All those scones and donuts and muffins and pies and jams and tea. Even the lotion and salve. I was frantically keeping my hands busy, keeping my mind occupied, trying to help others who seemed so stuck in their misery, so I wouldn't have time to stop long enough to see how messed up I was. And now, it's all making sense. More pieces coming together. More confirmation. And Julian's room? We're leaving it empty for now. We haven't really talked about another baby yet. It's still too soon, I think. But we've got time to figure out what comes next. But the room does look awfully lonely now. Waiting, expectant. I love you, Mama. I miss you and Julian both so much. I still get sad. Sometimes I think I might die from the pain when it catches me off guard. But I'm not grave-tending anymore. I'm choosing to look for the wonder and beauty in my memories, even if I have to wade through the sadness to get to it. I'm choosing to be expectant, to look for the next adventure ahead of us. Oh, I hear Christian. He's bringing home the new countertop we ordered last week. P.S. I looked it up. A craw is the crop of a bird. It's like a first stomach where the digestion begins to take place in lieu of chewing, since birds don't have teeth. The bug or slug or grain or kernel sits in there and digestive juices begin to break it down until it's ready for the gizzard. We had chickens, Mama. Did I know this? I saw pictures on the internet of what happens when something gets stuck in a craw. I know there's no sickness or gross stuff up there, but if you happen to have access to the internet, don't look it up. I am traumatized by this. I will never talk about anything getting stuck in my craw again. April 25. Dear Mama, so I'm writing to you from my completely discombobulated kitchen. Love that word. Reminds me of the three fairies in Sleeping Beauty. They were truly discombobulated without their magic, weren't they? I have company, a wee little one curled up on my lap. She has the tiniest ears, the greenest eyes you've ever seen, and a belly so round she looks like she swallowed a water balloon. Against my better judgment, I am the smitten mother of a kitten. Shelley Little comes by to visit me every other Friday morning at 9:30 sharp on her way to the grocery store. I make my elderberry muffins and she brings jasmine tea. That girl. Slowly but surely, she's beginning to talk about her past, and it's heartbreaking. Her father was a horrible man, Mama. I can't even imagine how she lived day in and day out under such a dark cloud of fear. Her obsessive-compulsive behavior is better, but she's had to break those patterns ever so slowly, one at a time. Last week when she was here, she told me that she can leave her house now without going into a sheer panic that she'd left her front door unlocked while she was gone. I know the irrational panic comes with the disorder, but I wanted her to talk about it, to get it completely out on the table since she seemed so proud of it. So I asked her what she was afraid would happen if the door had been unlocked. After 3, I counted them, gulping swallows of tea, she told me she used to be afraid her father would come home if she left the door unlocked. I didn't say anything, but her father is dead. He has been for several years. I know it doesn't make sense in the real world, she explained, her deep eyes flickering with shadows. But in here, she pointed at her temple, and in here, she put a hand over her heart, it makes perfect sense. I understand. Julian and you are just as alive today in my head and heart as her father is in hers. A few weeks ago, when she was here, Shelley also brought Bagheera. Yes, Bagheera. This tiny ball of black fur with her glass-green eyes is named Bagheera. I know, Bagheera is a boy name, but she sleeps just like the panther does in Jungle Book, her front paws crossed under her chin, her head slightly cocked to one side, her back legs bent up on either side of her body. Christian calls her Baggy. Poor little thing. Baggy, not Christian. Shelley explained to me that the kitten had been brought to her by Eddie, of all people. He'd discovered the litter in the crawlspace under the big house at the trailer park. There were only 3 kittens, but the mother was obviously feral, hissing and snarling at him every time he tried to get close, and the crawlspace, although larger than some, didn't leave much room for evading angry mama claws. So he decided to wait a week or 2 and see if they took off on their own. One day, when he poked his head under to check on them, there was only one tiny kitten in the little bed of rags and debris. Obviously, the mother cat was moving the litter. But the next day, the kitten was still there, and from what he could tell, wasn't doing well. Not knowing what else to do, he brought the kitten to Shelley. She was certain it was a runt, most likely abandoned by the mother, and she began caring for it. However, Eddie told her in no uncertain terms that she was at her park limit on pets, and he could not make an exception for her regardless of his personal feelings for her, or everyone else would expect the same. She could care for it until it was old enough to find a permanent home, period. Shelley didn't bring Bagheera for me. She brought her because the kitten was still not out of the woods, and she didn't want to leave her alone for long periods of time. But I couldn't help myself. I scooped her up out of the carrier and tucked her up under my chin, and she started purring, a ridiculous ratcheting sound that vibrated against the underside of my jaw. I saw something in Shelley's eyes at that moment, an odd mixture of grief and relief, and then she smiled. Willow? Her voice was quiet, as always, but I could hear the ring of hope in her question. "Would you like to have the kitten?" I pulled the cat away from my neck and held it out in front of me, studying her. That was a mistake. How could I resist both Shelley and the kitten with their big orphan eyes both staring up at me like I was the answer to their prayers? Christian says I'm a pushover, but I'm not. I've said no to a lot of things in my day, but I can't explain it. Bagheera just belongs here, and she's doing beautifully. When I got her just over 2 weeks ago, I had to feed her with a bottle. Yes, they make kitten bottles. They're so tiny. And special formula. And she had to eat about 10 times a day. But she's grown so much and is now eating soft cat food and drinking her formula from a bowl. I just took her to Shelley's vet a few days ago, an elderly man named Dr. White, and he told me he thinks she's about 6 weeks old, even though she's very small, most certainly the runt of the litter. But he gave her a clean bill of health and told me I was a good little mother. I half expected him to pat me on the head or scratch me behind my ears. The only problem now? I can't have a cat in my kitchen, not if I'm going to pass inspections for licensing. What was I thinking? But Christian has saved the day once again. He's added French doors to the kitchen design. It's a good idea anyway, to be able to close off the kitchen from any contamination from the rest of the house, something that will look really good to inspectors determining if I meet licensing standards. And it will keep wee Miss Baggy off the counters. And French doors are so lovely. And so expensive. Sigh. That puts things off a little longer. The budget is already stretched thin, and adding French doors means at least another month out. At this rate, I may not make my first sale until next year. Speaking of doors, I know you'd ask if you were here. Julian's bedroom door is closed for now. I haven't been in there in 3 weeks, not since before Bagheera arrived. No, it doesn't really have anything to do with the cat. That was just divine timing, I suppose, God bringing me a little needy thing to pour myself into. It's just that now with the room empty, it feels strange to go in there. But we're not ready to turn it into something else yet, so it's kinda in limbo, I guess. Last night I dreamed about it, though. In my dream, I could feel a frigid wind sweeping into our bedroom, and I was shivering, my teeth chattering. I got up to see where the wind came from. I was barefoot and only wearing a sleeveless nightgown that barely covered my knees. I couldn't find my robe anywhere and searched frantically for a scarf, digging through drawer after drawer and only finding shoes. I could see Christian's suit coat draped over the chair across the room, but I kept coming up with reasons why I shouldn't put it on. I tried wrapping my hair around me like a cape, but the wind kept whipping it away so that it flew out behind me. I tried to pull the blanket off the bed, but it was too heavy to lift. Finally, so cold my fingers and toes were going numb, I hobbled over and slipped into Christian's coat. It was still warm from his body, but it smelled like Daddy. I sighed and dropped into the chair, relishing in the comfort it brought. Before long, though, the wind started up, tugging on my hair like it was trying to get my attention. I got up and followed it, letting it pull me along. I ended up standing at Julian's closed bedroom door. It sounded like a gale force inside the room, a howling wind through eerie woods. In a panic, desperate to save Julian from that wild ferocity, I threw open the door and rushed inside. Instead of chaos, though, I was instantly surrounded by peace. Not complete silence, but gentle noise. Birds chirped a sweet song, a clock ticked somewhere, and I could hear the murmur of voices just far enough away I couldn't make out specific words. Remember that scene in Snow White when she'd run in a blind panic from the hunter, and the woods around her were filled with terror? Then she wakes up to find it's a beautiful day, and she's surrounded not by creeping, clawing creatures, but by baby animals and wildflowers. I woke up to Christian pulling me up against him, his voice midnight husky, murmuring an apology in my ear for stealing the blanket. The man had pulled the whole thing sideways off me in his sleep, and I really was shivering. But the spell of that dream hasn't yet broken, Mama. I haven't opened Julian's door today, and I'm not going to. I'm okay with it the way it is, at peace. It's not going anywhere, and neither are we. So until we're ready to make some decisions about it, the door will likely stay closed. Christian agreed. He brought me coffee in bed this morning and called me his snow queen, apologizing again for taking all the blankets. I assured him that the cold never bothered me anyway, and that I wasn't sorry at all. I'm too grateful for that little dream to be sorry. I've mentioned Disney movies too many times in this letter, Mama. But they're on my mind today because you're on my mind today. April is winding down, and in about 2 weeks, it'll be Mother's Day. And I don't know quite where I fit in the grand scheme of things. I know I'm a mother, no matter where Julian is, and I know you're my mother, no matter where you are. But where does that leave me? Maybe that's why I had that dream. For now, I just need to stop trying to figure it all out and let Christian cover me. Remember how I used to make you act out those original Disney movies with me? Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White? You were the absolute best, most believable wicked stepmother/evil fairy/old hag in the world, and you made me feel like the most beautiful princess in the world. Thank you for being such a wonderful mom. I called Daddy and made him sing Bare Necessities to me and Bagheera in his best Baloo voice. You made a pretty scary Shere Khan, too, Mama. Your accent was perfect, even though your voice wasn't nearly deep enough. I love you. May 19. Dear Mama, last night I woke up from a sound sleep, and I knew something wasn't right. I lay there in the dark, wide awake, my heart pounding so loudly it was all I could hear for a few moments. I had this strange, superimposed memory from childhood, as though for just a split second, I actually was Miss Clavel in the orphanage in France in the Madeline book, sitting up in the middle of the night, knowing something was not right. I couldn't tell you what it was that woke me. Christian didn't stir beside me. But maybe that's why. He was so still, every muscle in his body rigid, not even breathing that I could tell. But when I reached for him, he flinched and drew in a breath that made me think of a drowning man. And then he started to tremble. The curve of his shoulder where I rested my hand was chilled, even under the covers, and a bit clammy, and the tiny muscles just beneath his skin twitched and flickered as though an electric current passed through him. I pushed up on my elbow, rolling toward him, trying not to panic. "What's wrong?" My voice vibrated with fear. He didn't answer, but the air he'd sucked in came back out in a whoosh that turned into a sound as wretched as I'd ever heard come out of a human being. "Oh, honey, Christian, honey, what is it?" I pulled him to me, and like a child, he burrowed his face into my chest, his long arms encircling me, clutching me tightly to him. And he wept in deep, gulping sobs, not loudly, but in such a way that left him lying spent in my embrace after only a few minutes. I cried too, in helplessness, not knowing how to give him comfort, not knowing what to say. "Oh, God," he moaned, his voice muffled against the fabric of my pajama top. "Oh, God, I'm sorry, Willow. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry." "It's okay, honey. Shh, it's okay." But in that moment, I didn't know if it would ever be okay again. We both needed a tissue, but I was afraid to move, to reach for the box on my nightstand. The night air seemed too thin to hold us together, and if one of us uncoiled an arm, we might slip apart and never find our way back to each other. We lay there in the dark, drenched in tears and despair, out of time, out of place, until finally Christian began to speak. Just a murmur at first, so low I couldn't make out individual words, but his voice was like a beacon, and I homed in on it, listening with my heart until I could understand what he said. "I can't remember, Willow. I remember arguing with you about my shirt. I remember eating half the fried egg sandwich you made me, then setting aside the rest of it to take with me and finish in the truck on my way to work. I remember the television being on and coming around the corner to see Julian, fist full of crackers or cereal practically shoved into his mouth, hypnotized by whatever cartoon he watched. But I don't remember leaving the house. I don't remember walking out the door and not double-checking to make sure it latched behind me. I don't remember getting in the truck." His voice broke off in a choked sob. "It's like those scenes in movies where everything slows down so much that the sound warps into a moaning or wailing, every moment and expression exposed and in clear focus. But in my mind, it's only sound. Everything just fades to black when I try to remember." As long as he kept talking, I was tethered to him by the shredded strands of his voice, still fragile, but strong enough for me to grab the tissue box. I balanced the box on the curve of my hip, in easy reach for both of us. He plucked several out and shoved them up between his face and my shirt, blowing his nose only enough to be able to speak more clearly. "I dream about that morning sometimes. It's the same thing every time. That fried egg sandwich, the television playing in the other room, ironing my shirt and angry at myself for being angry with you. It's like I'm right there all over again. But in my dream," his throat tightened and he swallowed hard, "I know what's going to happen, Willow. I know what's coming. And even though I know, I can't change anything. I can't stop eating that sandwich, and I can't go in the living room and pick Julian up and turn off the television, and I can't stop being angry at you. But I know if I don't, the blackness will come and consume us all. But I can't do anything different. I just watch myself do it all over again and again and again." The last words came out in tatters. "Oh, Christian. Oh, honey." Words failed me, and all I could do was offer what little comfort my presence was. I cupped the back of his head, my fingers buried in his soft, short hair, pressing him to me. My heart beneath his cheek ached at the pain in his voice. Why had I never asked him how he was coping, how he was dealing? Why did I imagine, even for one moment, that my suffering was greater than his? "It all goes black," he continued. "I can hear the distorted sound, but other than that, it's like I'm floating in space, completely adrift and alone in the blackness. Then suddenly everything sweeps back in, and the wailing is you in my dream, and I wake up, my own moan stuck in my throat." Another tremor coursed through him. I could hardly breathe, let alone say anything coherent. So much pain, so much suffering. And I'd left him alone. I'd abandoned him to the blackness. I think." His voice wasn't much more than a whisper, trembling but brave. I think if I could remember what came next, I might stop dreaming about it." He ran his right hand absent-mindedly up and down the curve of my back, fingering the knobs of my spine. His hold on me began to loosen, so that he wasn't quite clinging to me anymore, his body relaxing against mine. "I didn't know, Christian," I finally whispered back. "Why didn't you tell me? You haven't... Have you dreamed this since I've been home? Was it possible he'd suffered like this in silence, lying beside me, trembling and weeping without reaching out for me? I didn't know whether to be hurt, angry, or even more afraid for us." "Not at first. In fact, I didn't dream about that day for nearly 3 months, and I thought maybe with you home, here with me, it had gone. But then..." He sighed, his warm breath feathering across the sensitive skin over my collarbone, where it was exposed at the edge of the neckline of my top. He'd turned his face away from my chest so he could breathe easier, so he could speak more freely. "But last month, after we put all Julian's things away..." "Why didn't you wake me?" I spoke quietly, my words weighed down by grief, both mine and his. I could feel him shake his head against my chest. I didn't think..." "You didn't think what? That I could handle it?" I tried not to let resentment creep into my voice, but I heard it anyway. No, Willow." He lifted his head for the first time, pulling away a little so he could look at me, his face only inches from mine. There wasn't enough light to make out much more than the silhouette of his rumpled hair and angular jawline and the ridge of his straight nose, but I could feel his eyes searching for mine in the darkness. "I just assumed it had returned because we'd worked in his room and because we talked so much about him, but that it would go away again. Apparently, that's not quite the way it's going to be." He sighed deeply, and even though I sensed his discouragement, I also thought I heard a hint of relief in the telling. "It's better, though, with you here." He lowered his head again and murmured against my neck. "Christian has been like this monument of strength to me this last 1.5 years, always steadfast, always faithful, always there, even when I wasn't. I needed him to be a rock for us. I needed him to be immovable because I was on such shaky ground. I needed him to push through this in order to prove to me it could be done. I needed to know that if I followed him, we'd get through this to the other side. I didn't know. I didn't know how much he needed me, too. Because I didn't ask, and because he didn't tell. Oh, Mama, will we ever be put back together again?" We didn't talk for a long time, but finally, my arm beneath him started tingling and I had to move. We eased apart just long enough for me to remove my damp shirt. Before I could get out of bed to find another one, he pulled me back up against him, and together we searched for and found a few more of our broken pieces in the dark. Before we fell asleep, we prayed together, asking God to cover our home, our room, our bed, to protect our sleep and our dreams. Christian shared something with me that I thought was so cool. In the Bible, there are so many verses that talk about being able to sleep in peace, to lie down and rest because God protects. But sometimes that seems so trite because we know it isn't always like that. Sometimes we're attacked by fear and doubt and dark thoughts, and when we sleep and those things come to us in our dreams, it's like being hit when we're at our most vulnerable. So Christian told me about something he found in Psalm 59. He really likes the New King James Version Bible, and in this section, King David is surrounded by his enemies, and he cries out to God, "For look, they lie in wait for my life. The mighty gather against me, not for my transgression, nor of my sin, O Lord. They run and prepare themselves through no fault of mine. Awake to help me, and behold, you, therefore, O Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel, awake to punish all the nations. Do not be merciful to any wicked transgressions." I looked it up in my Message Bible today, just to see what it said. Check this out. Desperados have ganged up on me. They're hiding in ambush for me. I did nothing to deserve this, God, crossed no one, wronged no one. All the same, they're after me, determined to get me. Wake up and see for yourself. You're God, God of angel armies, Israel's God. Get on the job and take care of these pagans. Don't be soft on these hard cases. Okay, at first glance, I know that may seem presumptuous of David, demanding that God wake up and show up. But the more I read through chapter 59, the more I realized David was not really ordering God around, but rather he was reminding himself that God was not only awake and aware, but beyond capable of crushing the bad guys, because God was, and is, Lord of hosts, God of angel armies. David's cry wasn't one of unbelief, but that of a beloved child waking up in the middle of the night, caught in the throes of terror and calling out, in spite of his fear, believing his father would show up. David knew God was there, and he would show up, and he would bring with him that peace that would allow him to lay his head down again and rest. And that's what Christian clings to, that desperate cry of anguished belief that God will and does show up, even in the dead of night when everyone else is asleep. He says the verses feel active, not passive, like he's able to do something rather than just lying there in the dark waiting for the undisturbed sleep that believers are supposedly blessed with. Ha! He says it's like swinging a sword instead, like charging in with the mightiest of all armies. I think I understand. So, we prayed David's prayer together last night. Awake to help us. You are God. You are God of angel armies. And we slept, in each other's arms and in peace. There was something else in that passage that did my heart good to hear, Mama. The part where David says, "I did nothing to deserve this." Christian and I did do something to deserve this, and we're both well aware of it. But somehow, we're learning to forgive ourselves and each other, and to accept the forgiveness and mercy God offers us. David was no saint either, but he knew he was living freely under the covering of God and could call on him at any time. We're learning to live under that same covering. Will the dream keep coming back? Will Christian remember? Should he remember those terrible moments? I don't know. But I feel like we're armed and ready for whatever comes, and leading the charge is the God of Israel, the Lord of hosts, the God of the angel armies. Despair turns to fragile hope yet again. Tomorrow is Christian's birthday. He's asked me to make your cheesecake, Mama. It's what he asks for every year. And that elderberry pomegranate jelly turned syrup? I'm going to toss a few blueberries into it and drizzle it over the top to class it up a little. Doesn't that sound scrumptious? We're holding on to every extra dollar to put into the kitchen remodel. Everything costs a little more than we'd planned and takes a little longer than we'd planned, but it's coming together. Our goal is to have it ready for me to make my first batch of scones by my birthday next month. The remodel won't be finished, but I'll be able to start using that side of the kitchen again. In other words, we're not going to do anything that costs too much for either of our birthdays this year. I'm cooking a pot roast for him, his favorite home-cooked meal of all time, and we're watching a movie of his choice here at home. with freshly popped popcorn, the real deal, the kind you pop in a big pot on the stovetop. He loves the real deal popcorn, loves it. Can't stand to sit down to watch a movie until he's popped a batch of popcorn and drenched it in melted butter and tossed it with too much sea salt. It's part of the movie night ritual in our home. I love this man God gave me, Mama, and I feel like I'm blooming again, like my happy plants are doing out back, in the love that he has for me. We're getting better. It's not easy, but we're getting better at moving forward. I'm just glad I'm here to celebrate Christian this year. I'm ashamed to admit I didn't even send him a card last year. Not just because it's his birthday, but because every new day we have together is a reason to celebrate. We're learning to find joy in both big and little things, and that joy inspires hope. Princess Baggy waves a teeny tiny paw at you and Julian, Mama. Are there kittens in heaven? June 20. Dear Mama, remember how you used to turn our birthday celebrations into birth month celebrations? Every day of the month was marked with something special. Well, this month, even though it's not quite the same, I feel like I've awakened to something to celebrate almost every single day, reminding me so much of you. The first day of June, we put a brand new refrigerator on a 30-day layaway at Home Depot. It's a gorgeous, bright white side-by-side unit I've drooled over since starting this project, but one we thought we would never have been able to afford. One day, though, while we were there shopping for cupboard door hardware, Christian grabbed my arm and pointed. An orange-aproned man walked up to it with a folder full of fluorescent orange labels and slapped one on the front of it, marking it down almost half price. It was still more than we wanted to pay, but I could see Christian's mind spinning as quickly as mine was to try to reallocate funds from one place to another to make it happen. His eyebrows went up in question. I nodded, mentally kissing goodbye the new dishwasher I'd insisted I couldn't do without, and we practically tackled the poor guy on the spot. You should have seen us, Mama. Even you might have been embarrassed. No, I take that back. You would have started hollering at him to get his attention from across the store. Anyway, without explaining, Christian reached over and ripped that sale tag off the front of the fridge, and I started talking about divine timing and cottage industries and calling the poor man, his name was Alex, my own personal Hermes. He stood there agape, unable to decide whether we were excited or angry about the price drop, or just plain crazy, and clearly wondering if we meant to steal the thing right out from under his nose. He moved to stand in front of it as though to say, "Over my dead body." Christian put a hand on my arm, and I stopped talking long enough for him to explain to Alex that no, I hadn't mistaken him for someone else, that he was, in a sense, a messenger of good news to us, and that, yes, we had every intention of buying it if there was a way we could put a deposit down now and hold it until we did a little shuffling of funds. Then he handed the tag back to the guy, who slapped it back in place on the freezer side of the appliance. I could tell by the look in Alex's eyes that he still wasn't sure if he was safe, but he swallowed bravely, pulled out a black marker, and wrote "Sold" across the tag, then turned and barked, "Follow me." He led us to a manager station, explained the situation in low tones, leaning forward so we couldn't see his face. I'm pretty sure he rolled his eyes at least twice, and we put down our deposit and walked out of that store with a receipt and a 30-day layaway. We forgot all about the cupboard door hardware and had to go back the next day, and I found a set of cut glass knobs that had one missing from the packet. Yep, half price. Instead of 8, there were only 7, and we only need 6. So I have an extra one I can mount on a pretty board and use as an apron hook. The day before my birthday, we had dinner with Christian's folks. His big sister Shannon and her hubby Truman and their twin preteen boys were there, and we brought Dad along too. Well, his whole family pitched in, dragging Dad in on it with them, and got me the French doors of my dreams. They love to do family project gifts, pooling their resources when there's something big on someone's wish list. I was so overwhelmed. See, it was the first time we'd had a meal with everyone together since Julian, since before I moved out. I knew Shannon had been really angry at me for running and had even suggested Christian file for divorce. I know, though, that she doesn't hate me, Mama, but hated what I was doing to him. That night, after dinner, the guys headed off to the living room to watch a game, while Shannon, me, and Charlotte, Christian's mom, settled on stools at a counter in the kitchen, sipping coffee and catching up. For several minutes, we skirted the big issues and talked about the twins, about Charlotte's book club, and about my Elderberry Croft products and plans. Well, that segued rather conveniently into questions about the actual Elderberry Croft. Starting with Kathy, I regaled them with stories about my beloved neighbors. But halfway through telling them about Andrea and George's loss, Shannon abruptly stood up, pushed away from the counter, and circled around to the sink. I didn't say a word as she turned the water on, then off, then on full blast again. It was like she was trying to get her words to flow like the water, but couldn't find the on-off lever. Finally, she turned around, crossed her arms over her chest, leaned her hip against the sink, and faced me. Her eyes glistened, and a single tear tracked down each cheek from the corners of her eyes. "Why? Why did you leave like that?" Her voice cracked, and the rasp of it was more accusing than any words she could utter. "Do you think those people needed you more than Christian did?" When I didn't respond right away, she continued, "He lost both of you, Willow." She swallowed hard and whispered, "How did you expect him to bear it?" No one else had put it that way before, and suddenly I was 12 again, and Daddy was sitting across from me at our little scarred oak table, telling me that you were coming home from the hospital, Mama. I couldn't understand why he was so sad. This was good news, right? His bloodshot eyes, the skin beneath them smudged with fatigue and despair, met mine. 2 tears slid from the corners of his eyes, just like Shannon's. "She's coming home to say goodbye," he'd said. "A nurse is coming, too, to help keep her comfortable." Then he dropped his head in his hands and began to weep. I didn't know what to do, Mama. I was 12. I told myself to get up and go to him, to put my arms around him and comfort him, but I couldn't move. I just sat across from him, watching his body shake. It was almost soundless at first, like he was trying to hold it all in. But when a sob tore out of him, I jumped, the sound startling me into motion. I leapt up out of my chair, toppling it over behind me, and fled the room. I ran and ran and ran, abandoning him to his grief, just like I did Christian. What is wrong with me, Mama? It was almost as if I had convinced myself, if I wasn't there when you came home, then you wouldn't be able to say goodbye to me. And if you couldn't say goodbye, then you wouldn't be able to die on us. I headed into the woods along the trail that went past the heap of boulders. You know, that one where the nettle comes back so heartily year after year, and on up to the ridge to that glorious stand of birch trees. I had a surprise planned for you in the circle of those trees. The whole time you were in the hospital, I'd spent almost every afternoon up there, turning that little hollow into a sanctuary for when you came home, on the mend. I was going to take you there, let you rest on a blanket on a pile of leaves, and read to you while you got your strength back. I'd even constructed a little shelter for you, in case the sun got too hot or the breeze too cold, a 3-sided thing made from branches tied together with twine, and braced against the thick trunk of an ancient tree long ago fallen and returned to the earth. In my shock-addled mind, I reasoned I'd wait for you there, for surely, if you came to me there, it meant you were getting better, and you would not die. Daddy, poor Daddy. He searched high and low for me. I could hear him every once in a while, being up higher than he, his voice winding its way along the trail to me. I curled up inside the little fort, hands over my ears, and promptly fell asleep. I awoke to darkness all around me, and in a panic stood up without thinking, knocking over the fort and making such a ruckus every wild animal that hadn't known I was there before surely did then. Terror gripped me, and I started screaming like a wild animal myself. And suddenly, Daddy was there, that headlamp flashlight he loves to wear shining in my eyes, his arms around me. I could hear other voices in the darkness, too, and I recognized many of them, friends and neighbors come to help look for me. Shannon's words reminded me of Daddy's that night. "Would you have me lose both of you at the same time? I couldn't bear it, Willow." I think that's why I ran, I suppose, after Julian died. Maybe part of me, that 12-year-old girl part of me, thought if I didn't have to look at his empty crib or listen to the stillness of the house around me anymore, then maybe he wasn't really gone. I tried to explain the best I could to these other two important women in my husband's life, but my words sounded empty and selfish to my ears. I finally stopped talking and just stared down into my half-full cup of coffee. Charlotte stepped in then, drawing Shannon close to her side, and reached out to press a cool palm to my cheek. "I'm truly glad you're home, Willow, and I love you as though you were my own daughter. But no more running, you hear? We are your family, and we are a safe place to hide when you need sanctuary." She turned to Shannon, and I could see her squeeze her daughter's shoulder. "Right, Shan?" A moment's hesitation, then Shannon reached for my hand and held it between both of her own. "Run to us, Willow, not from us, okay?" They were both very pushy about it, Mama, and something shifted inside of me and opened up to them, a place inside of me I'd thought only belonged to you. Family. It's good to really belong. A truly wonderful birthday gift. And speaking of belonging and family, and of Andrea and George, on the 10th, Christian and I attended their small family wedding at her parents' house. They have a lovely, huge backyard, and even though it was really hot during the day, once the sun started going down, the breeze picked up and cooled things nicely. The wedding wasn't until 5 o'clock, followed by a delicious meal catered by a local Mexican restaurant, George's choice. Then, on the 16th, Myra and Jackson tied the knot, too. They did so at the courthouse, but they followed up with a potluck out at the coach house, and we went to that, too. There's another new tenant in Elderberry Croft, the second one since I moved out, but no one knows anything about him, and he wasn't at the potluck. Maybe he'll attend the 4th of July barbecue next month. I got a secret thrill, though, to hear everyone still referring to the little cottage as Willow's Place or even Elderberry Croft, and not just Space Number 12. Yes, I brought a basket full of pastries. The favorite was my scones, but I think it was the maple cream cheese frosting more than anything. People love that stuff. And now, here it is, the 20th, and the fridge is being delivered today sometime. Then the French doors will be installed tomorrow. Poor Princess Baggy. She'll be locked out of the kitchen for good once those go up. By the way, she's claimed your old bathrobe as hers. I left it on the floor one morning. I'd used it because mine was in the wash, and I discovered her burrowed down into it 3 different times that day. I moved it to the living room to see what she'd do. Sure enough, the next morning, I found her curled up in a little ball inside the folds of it, only her little black nose sticking out of it. So I guess it's hers now. Christian is happy about that. He always said it was a little weird to see me in my mother's bathrobe, that he didn't know whether to kiss me or cover his eyes. So I bought myself a new one for my birthday, a thick, smoky blue thing that feels like I'm wearing a cloud. Christian says I do look like an angel in it, so maybe the whole cloud thing has bearing. Life is good, Mama. Even the hard stuff, like talking to Christian's women, is good in the end, worth getting up each day for, worth taking another breath for. I miss you. Will you do me a favor? Will you squeeze Julian so tightly for me that he cries, then cuddle with him and kiss him and make him feel better and tell him I love him? No, never mind. That sounds psycho. Squeeze him so tightly he laughs, then cuddle with him and kiss him, and just tell him I love him, okay? July 10. Dear Mama, last week we went to the coach house again to celebrate the 4th of July with the gang. We had several options for the day. Christian's folks invited us to go to the park with them and their church group. Shannon and her guys went to a pool party at a friend's and asked us to join them. Even Daddy called to see if we had plans and said we could go hang out and watch the fireworks from the back lawn of the retirement home with him and all his girlfriends. But during Myra and Jackson's wedding potluck last month, we'd all agreed that we wanted to do another barbecue and contraband fireworks show again this year. So that's what we did. It was wonderful, Mama, in so many ways, but so different. I couldn't help but think of Thomas Wolfe and his George Webber character in You Can't Go Home Again. Of course, there's nothing threatening about my visits to the trailer park, but like George, I experienced a sense of having been displaced, even if by my own hand, and left floundering a bit. It's not just Elderberry Croft, either. I still feel that way a little bit about coming back here, to the home Christian and I have. I am home, but it's not the same, and not just because of Julian's absence. We are the same people, Christian and I, but we're changed in ways that are almost too small to be able to put a finger on, yet significant enough to create ripples in what I once had thought was eternal and immovable between us. The guy living in Elderberry Croft now is the second tenant to stay there since I moved out. He's a long-distance truck driver, like Carney, purely coincidental, they don't know each other. And he's on the road 2 or 3 weeks at a time, then home for several days, before he's off and driving again. He was on a road trip last week, so I still haven't met him. Kathy says he's a nice enough man. That means he's acknowledged her dogs and her, in that order, at least once since moving in. But the little cottage seems to be fading somehow, and it makes me sad to see it so utilitarian. It's beginning to feel more like just plain old Space Number 12. Sigh. Kathy and Myra also told me what little they knew about the woman who'd first moved into Elderberry Croft. I refuse to stop calling it that, no matter how it feels, the month after I left. Marital problems, presumably. She came with the bare minimum, stayed less than 3 months, and left the place looking as though she'd never been. Nora. Her name was Nora. They said the woman kept to herself the whole time she was here. Not like you, Kathy said, rolling her eyes at me. You wouldn't mind your own business. You forced yourself on everyone. Whatever her reasons for being there, I hope Nora found what she was looking for while she was tucked into the arms of Elderberry Croft. Almost everyone came to the potluck, even Andrea and George, Andrea pulled me aside, so reminiscent of last year, and told me they were going to try to get pregnant again. I hugged her hard before she could ask about us. I saw the question in her eyes, but I don't know how to answer that. Christian and I are in such a strange place right now. In some ways, it's like we're newlyweds all over again, figuring out what it means for two to become one once more. I don't know that we're ready to try to figure out what it means for two to become three again. Not yet. There's a new guy, Mitch, living in the upstairs apartment where Andrea and George were. He's a friend of Jackson's and has settled in well at the park, hanging out on Myra's front porch, playing cards with the rest of the guys. He looks like he's in his late 60s or early 70s, and he's kind of quiet, but from what I gathered, his wife recently passed away. I'm glad he's at the coach house where there are so many people who can understand. Prue and Carney came to the potluck this year. They're in the throes of packing up Prue's apartment in the main coach house. They got married right before Carney had his heart surgery last year. She insisted they do it before because she wanted the authority, as his wife, to make certain he got the best treatment possible during his hospital stay and recovery. They're so cute together, Mama. Anyway, now that he's been given a clean bill of health, they're moving to a new place. Carney says it's the bathroom. It was cute when it was just Prue, but there's something wrong with a guy like me standing on a pink fur rug and drying off with leopard print towels. I have to admit, although the visual was more than I needed, I agree wholeheartedly. As much of a big bear as Carney is, I never could juxtapose him over the whole Wild Kingdom theme Prue has going. I wonder what their house is going to look like. I heard Prue talking to Vivian about carnivals and Coney Island, and I can see it. They remind me a little of a circus strongman and his fancy lady, but I would never say so, just because it seems so cliché, and those two are anything but cliché. Eddie and Shelley are still an item, but I think they're perfectly content with the way things are, having their own places right across the footbridge from each other. It's a little strange to me because I'm not in either of their shoes, but I really think they like being able to go home to their own places at the end of the night. Even with all the tenants moving in and out of the park, real change comes carefully, if not slowly, at the coach house. I'm telling you, especially with someone like Shelley. Which is why I think Eddie is good for her. He's there, he's not going anywhere, and she can blossom at her own pace. They seem happy with each other, and she's come out of her shell so much since I first met her. Eddie is solid and responsible and predictable, and Shelley thinks he's the cat's meow, which is saying a lot coming from the resident cat lady. Myra and Jackson. They've been married for a month now. Myra refused to move out of her darling little trailer, so Jackson moved in with her. I was afraid Al was going to be jealous, but he seems to have taken this all in stride. He's an interesting guy, Mama, but I just can't read him well enough to feel totally at ease around him. Out of necessity and self-preservation, he's always kept things pretty close to the vest, and I suppose ingrained habits like that are hard to break. But even now, with everyone knowing about his poor wife, her passing, and his part in it, in my opinion, he still seems wary and watchful. Not like he's going to hurt anyone, but like he's afraid someone might think he would. I do pray a nice woman comes along who can break down that wall and help release him from the prison he's lived in for so long. I don't know if he's a believer or not, but I do know Christian prayed often with him while he was helping Al sort out all the fallout from his wife's death. I just can't imagine it's healthy for the heart to live every day looking over your shoulder like that, though, Mama. To me, he still seems stuck. He looks good, though. He's lost a few pounds, Myra says he hardly drinks at all anymore. She would know, little mother hen that she is, so that's all good. Speaking of drinking, Donnie stopped in for a while, which surprised me, considering what a disaster last year's July 4th celebration was for him. He did bring a woman named Sheena with him, so that eased my mind. Christians, too, ha. Even though he'd never met the infamous Banks brother, Donnie and Eddie look enough alike that there's no mistaking their family. And Donnie did make a point to give me the once-over quite openly until Christian stepped up behind me, one arm going around my waist to pull me back against him, a little more aggressively than necessary, I thought, the other thrust out toward Donnie as he introduced himself as Christian, Willow's husband. It was as close to a staking my claim move as he's made on me since before we were married. And I have to tell you, Mama, I was suddenly extremely aware of how delicious a man Willow's husband is. I happily leaned back into him, not so much to ensure Donnie got the message, but to let Christian know I was really quite thrilled to be claimed so boldly by him. Then Doc clapped an arm around Donnie's shoulder and said something low and clipped in his ear. Donnie's eyes got really big for just a moment before the two of them wandered off to talk to Eddie. I have no idea what that conversation covered, but I don't think Donnie even so much as looked at me the rest of the time they were there. Sheena seemed nice enough, but I have to tell you, Mama, it was like sitting next to a porcupine with her quills slicked back. She spent most of her time watching Donnie, almost like a parole officer or a babysitter. When she wasn't watching him, she was sizing up us women, even though we were all there with our husbands or boyfriends. As uncomfortable as that made everyone, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. I heard the talk swirling around in her wake. I guess she's been through several breakups and reunions with Donnie over the years, and most of them have been because of his drug and alcohol abuse, which apparently translates into domestic abuse and infidelity in his case. She's one of the walking wounded. According to Edith, Donnie's mom, he's been sober for a whole year now, but I'm not so sure. I have very little experience with alcoholics or addicts, but his behavior seemed kind of shady to me, furtive. That's a good word for the way he was acting. He kept disappearing, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sheena, and I think, don't quote me on this, that Sheena had something pretty potent in her water bottle, one of those huge hot pink 64-ounce sports bottles with the foam grip and the accordion plastic straw. Doc made some comment about her not getting too close to the grill at one point, lest we have fireworks a little early. She and Donnie left shortly after that, but I overheard Prue mention to Eddie that Sheena had asked her a lot of questions about her apartment. I can't imagine Eddie being okay with Donnie moving into the park on a more permanent and official basis, with or without Sheena. But how does that saying go? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer? I don't think Donnie is an enemy per se, but he's definitely on shaky footing with pretty much everyone there. Except Edith. I'm sure that's why Edith was making such a point about him being sober, though. I know she'd like to have him close, but at least she has put her foot down about him moving in with her again, even temporarily. Or maybe Eddie put his foot down about it. Goodness, the mess we can make of life when we live only for ourselves. I'm sad for Donnie, that with so many people rooting for him, with the extent his family and friends have gone to help him, that he's missing out on being the man he could be by trying to stay the child he no longer is. I'm sad for Sheena in ways I can't even begin to put to words. I'm sad for Edith, who clearly struggles with accepting the truth of Donnie's condition, not because she can't see it, but because she loves him so much and hope allows her to keep her blinders on. I'm sad for Eddie, too. He seems to handle it well, Mama. But every once in a while, I see him look at Edith, waiting. For what? Approval, I'm certain. She misses all the things he does for her, all he does for the people who live at the park, for the place itself, because she's so focused on what little Donnie does. So yes, the day was bittersweet for me. So many things have changed and moved forward, progressed since this time last year. Andrea and George, married and thinking about a new baby. Joe and Vivian gone public with their marriage. Myra and Jackson, Carney and Prue, Eddie and Shelley. But Elderberry Croft, Al, Donnie, even Doc, there alone. His youngest daughter, Janine, stops by periodically to check on her dad, and they seem to have the makings of a fairly healthy relationship in the works. But he's heard nothing from Tracy, his older girl. He still hasn't seen his wife, but he did receive a letter from Eleanor telling him she's proud of him for taking the steps he is. She's not ready to see him again, but she is willing to communicate through letters for now. For how long? I asked. Doc just shrugged and said it was up to Eleanor. Sometimes cycles are too ingrained in us, even when those extra pushes come and opportunities arise for new beginnings, for second and third and fourth chances, and change pries its way into every nook and cranny. Even then, we dig in our heels and try to force things to stay the same, panicking when they charge ahead without our permission. But the thing is, change is actually what brings us full circle in the end, right? And to deny it is to deny life, to deny God and His plan for our lives. Listen to this, Mama. This is what I love about Wolfe, how he captures this struggle so well. Child, child, have patience and belief, for life is many days, and each present hour will pass away. Son, son, you have been mad and drunken, furious and wild, filled with hatred and despair, and all the dark confusions of the soul. But so have we. You found the earth too great for your one life. You found your brain and sinew smaller than the hunger and desire that fed on them. But it has been this way with all men. You have stumbled on in darkness. You have been pulled in opposite directions. You have faltered. You have missed the way. But, child, this is the chronicle of the earth. Isn't that the saddest thing you've ever read? Do all people walk through murky places like this? Is that why his description of despair resonates so deeply with us? Or is it just me? And yet, he then offers hope to those who have walked those endless dark paths. What a wonderful word, hope. And now, because you have known madness and despair, and because you will grow desperate again before you come to evening, we who have stormed the ramparts of the furious earth and been hurled back, we who have been maddened by the unknowable and bitter mystery of love, we who have hungered after fame and savored all of life, the tumult, pain, and frenzy, and now sit quietly by our windows, watching all that henceforth nevermore shall touch us, we call upon you to take heart, for we can swear to you that these things pass. As gut-wrenchingly beautiful as Wolfe's words are, they are a mere echo of God's promises, aren't they? Hope. I cling to that hope. Every day, I grab on with both hands and hold on tight. The journey out of despair isn't easy. In fact, it's often arduous and even treacherous at times. But I refuse to lie down and be overwhelmed. I am learning to embrace change, to take another step, then another. I took Daddy some of my elderberry banana bread yesterday. I tried out a new recipe, and he's always game to be my guinea pig. He gave it a 3 thumbs up, 2 of his own and 1 from Glinda, the little lady from housekeeping who came by while we were visiting. He gave her the rest of it to take home to her family. She speaks very little English, but she and Daddy do a lot of thumbs-upping and thumbs-downing to communicate. Anyway, we talked for a long time about what it means to choose to live after facing death. Yours, Julian's, even Daddy's friends. He says rarely a month goes by that there isn't another goodbye party at Fairhaven. They have goodbye parties whenever anyone dies, but Daddy isn't sure whether it's to honor the person who died or to celebrate the fact that the remaining partygoers are still alive. You know Dad's dry sense of humor. Anyway, did you know that one of Daddy's favorite quotes is from You Can't Go Home Again? This is man who, if he can remember 10 golden moments of joy and happiness out of all his years, 10 moments unmarked by care, unseamed by aches or itches, has power to lift himself with his expiring breath and say, I have lived upon this earth and known glory. Daddy says he wants that last line, I have lived upon this earth and known glory, on his tombstone. In bed last night, as we lay curled together in the dark, I asked Christian if he had a favorite line from the book. I thought it might be, The guilty fleeth where no man pursueth, something he's quoted many a time because of his career choice. But my heart still hurts today, remembering his sleep-lulled voice rumbling against my cheek pressed to his back. It seems to me that in the orbit of our world, you are the North Pole, I the South, so much in balance, in agreement, and yet the whole world lies between. He woke me up before going to work this morning, however, bringing me a cup of coffee to aid in prying open my eyes. He sat on the edge of the bed and held my hand, toying with my wedding ring for several minutes while I put away my dreams and accepted the new day's existence. He didn't apologize, but I heard the regret in his voice. He must have felt my hot tears after I was sure he'd fallen asleep. Last night I told you one of my favorite quotes from You Can't Go Home Again, he said, ever so gently. And it is one of my favorites, because I have felt the truth of those words resonate in the marrow of my bones from the moment I first met you until this one. And I know I'll feel the truth of those words until the day I die. He paused, and I held my breath, so afraid of what he wasn't saying. Willow, he finally said, I want to spend every moment of this life crossing worlds to reach you. You are my grandest adventure, my life's journey, my heart's pursuit. I couldn't speak. It was almost too much for me to bear so early in the morning, but I sat still as a stone and let his verbal caress wash over me. He brushed his fingertips along one of my cheekbones, smoothing back the Medusa hair from my face. He wasn't finished, though. But this morning, when I got out of bed, you reached for my pillow and smiled in your sleep, and another line came to me. I looked it up because I wanted to get it right. He laid his long-fingered hand on top of my head and leaned forward to kiss my brow. Then, like a blessing, he quoted, Peace fell upon her spirit. Strong comfort and assurance bathed her whole being. Life was so solid and splendid and so good. Maybe Thomas Wolfe is wrong after all, Mama. I have come home, and it is so good.